Hi everyone, our next guest is a SaaS business expert who has been making exceptional contribution to the industry for 2 decades. A Harvard graduate, serial entrepreneur and thought leader. His first venture, Conveyo, was a huge success and later was acquired for $325 million. Being a passionate entrepreneur who finds thrills in solving big problems, he immediately started his next venture, Trust Radius, an online review platform that helps modern technology buyers make product decisions based on unbiased and insightful reviews. I'm super excited to introduce you to the founder of Conveyo and Trust Radius, Vinay Bhagat. Hi Vinay, thanks a lot for being here and being a part of our inaugural Partner Summit.
Delighted to be here with you, Apu, and to join the Hexnode inaugural Partner Summit.
Pleasure having you here. And I'm personally very excited to talk to you as a fellow entrepreneur who shared your passion for enterprise technology. I admire your work at Trust Radius and understand the value and the magnitude of what you have created for B2B software user community. At Hexnode, our solutions in endpoint management and SaaS ops are about as enterprise as it gets. So we know a thing or two about the space, and purchase decisions are very heavily driven by peer reviews and user feedbacks. But before getting to all of that, can you talk about your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, maybe it actually stems back to when I was 11 or 12 years old. I grew up in England. And my father was actually an industrial designer for Ford Motor Company, originally from India. But on the side, actually ran a side business that was his true passion. And I used to kind of go with him to London to buy products that then he would sell inside the Ford Motor Company. And that was sort of my first taste of entrepreneurship. And then when I was a teenager, I was really into rock music and actually used to go buy heavy metal record stores in bargain bins inside stores and then sell them to my friends at school at a big markup. So I think I always had an entrepreneurial gene from a very young age. But my first company I didn't actually start till I was 28 years old, which was Conveyo. Conveyo was an online marketing and fundraising platform for the nonprofit sector. I think, what I saw as an opportunity was to transform a really important sector that was quite antiquated from a technology perspective. And around that time, the dot-com period was happening, e-commerce was booming, and I just sort of questioned, as I think many entrepreneurs do, why was this phenomenon not happening in the sector, and just saw an amazing opportunity to help nonprofit organizations make use of technology. So over the course of 10 to 12 years, we built the company up to about 100 million in revenue. We took it public and then ultimately were acquired. But more importantly than building a good company, we also helped to transform a sector where before starting the company, maybe only $100 million was raised globally online each year. By the time we were exited, we were doing $1.5 billion in fundraising through our platform alone. Each year and making a real difference. And a lot of that was net new money to charities coming from people who were kind of new to philanthropy. So it was a great learning opportunity for me and a great chance to experience the idea of both building a company where my employees genuinely really like working at the company, but also a company where you can feel like you're having a big impact on the world.
Awesome. As a business, we had our fair share of ups and downs, but it's nothing like the challenge that you might have faced at the beginning of Conveyo. Early 2000s should have been the hardest with the dot-com bubble and tech crashing. And you managed not just to keep your company afloat, but significantly grow and scale your business during that period. I very much like to hear that story.
Yeah, I think I've been through it 3 times in different flavors right now. First, the dot-com crash, around the 2001, 2002 period. That was hard, honestly. As a first-time entrepreneur, I think I had rose-colored spectacles, I think is the saying, where you're a little bit over-optimistic and got too far ahead. Scaled my team a bit too fast before we truly had product market fit. The market, like any market, can sometimes take a while to evolve when you're building a new category. And so what we had to do, which was immensely painful, is downsize. So I took my team from about 75 to 40 overnight and then started hiring immediately. One of my board members, who was a senior executive at Dell, told me, if you're going to cut deep and then start growing immediately, because you have to think about the psychology of the team that's remaining with you. Obviously, you want to treat the people who are leaving your company gracefully and fairly and kindly. But what you don't want to do is to not cut deeply enough and then make it feel like the company is still at risk of having to do more reductions. And so he said, get yourself to the point where you're immediately growing again. And it was the best advice I could imagine. So we weathered the storm through resizing and having our team be the appropriate size of where we were in terms of our market evolution. And we never had to cut from there on. We just continued to grow. The 2007 period, the financial crisis, was another really interesting period where there was a lot of uncertainty in the financial markets, and that created uncertainty in the economy and uncertainty in every business. And the way that my business was affected was people weren't sure whether people were still going to give to nonprofits. Philanthropy was at question, and nonprofits were risk averse about whether they should be spending money. So it was a very difficult time. But what we did was really hunker down on ROI and proving that there was a very tangible ROI to what we were doing so people could continue to invest. We also innovated around our pricing models to do more sort of variable-based pricing based upon customer success as well. But lots of lessons, lots of scar tissue learned. And the pandemic, of course, is yet the third crisis now for my new company, but I think it's very different to the financial crisis and the dot-com bust.
All right, cool. In my experience, there's a moment in our life when we wish or hope for something better that we don't have, or what we already have is not going to have. And I've heard your story about the coffee machine in one of your early interviews, and what we it was really interesting. So was it the birth of the idea for Trust Radius, or was it a natural extension of what you did with Conveyor? Or how's the Trust Radius evolved over time?
Yeah, so the origin of Trust Radius, I think there are probably three core things that led to me creating Trust Radius. One is, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love solving hard problems. I love the process of birthing a company and creating kind of economic value in pursuit of solving a problem. So when I was selling Convio, I knew I wanted to go start something again. So my mind was very open to what was around me in the world. And, I think as an entrepreneur, you always, when you have your eyes open, you see things, you see opportunities that maybe otherwise you might be close to. So I would say first and foremost I was in that mindset of looking for my next idea. Secondly, my company was going through the purchase of an expensive piece of software for running HR for our business. It was actually we were a 450 person company. The investment was about $100,000 a year. We were signing a multi-year contracts. We signed the contracts, and then we realized that we'd made a mistake, that the products didn't squarely meet our functional needs. And when I spoke to my head of HR and her team who made the decision, they had done many of the things right in their due diligence process. They'd looked at the Gartner MQ. They'd spoken to the references provided by the salesperson. They'd had assurances from the salesperson that the product would meet their functional requirements. But we still made a mistake where there was a key feature that didn't work how we needed it to work to run our business. And what we hadn't done in our diligence process is really speak to people who had the same use case as us. And that kind of really taught me an important lesson, that products can be inherently good or maybe inherently bad, but you can have an inherently good product that's not a good fit for you because it doesn't work for your use case. And that's an incredibly important insight, that what buyers are really looking for is the right product for their use case. And the answer for any two businesses might be different in terms of what's right for them. And traditional forms of market intelligence, like an analyst report, don't comprehend use case. they're really kind of a one-size-fits-all framework. And I felt that there was a key missing ingredient. Now, as to the coffee machine story, around the same time, I was purchasing a gift for my wife, kind of a nice high-end coffee machine. I went to Williams-Sonoma, a store that sells nice appliances. The salesperson was trying to sell me one of the products in the store. I didn't quite trust I was getting objective advice. I asked one of my friends who I trust for his advice. He recommended a particular product. I went online. I found reviews. I went to sites like Costco.com and found, fine reviews. They were decent. Then I stumbled across a site called Coffee Geek. That was a specialized site where coffee mavens and aficionados go to write really in-depth reviews. And I was blown away. I was like, how is it that for basically $1,000 home appliance, I could get incredibly rich insights, but for a piece of tech that was going to run my business, that I was going to spend $200,000 on, I couldn't find anything. So I was just blown away at the difference between the transparency I had as a consumer and the transparency I had as a B2B buyer, and said, someone needs to solve this problem. And that's the problem I set out to solve.
Wow, that's incredible. You must have been seen different type of buyer personas and buying process associated with different industries and products. I feel that buying process and the decision-making process varies with the size of business and the industry. So when talking about the SaaS industry specifically, were you able to differentiate these processes between small, medium, and large companies?
To be honest, I think there are more commonalities than differences. I mean, I think the differences would be centered around kind of just the duration of the purchasing cycle and the number of people involved and maybe the rigor of the process in a larger company. Of course, the amount of spend makes a big difference. And I also think one other big difference that has driven purchasing differences is whether there's sort of a product-led growth aspect to the offering. So, modern software products like a Slack or a Miro, for example, are getting adopted by individual users or teams, and then they balloon from there. So I think there are factors outside of company size that make a difference to how a product ultimately gets purchased. But what I saw more from a commonality perspective was that there was a craving that's universal to know the whole truth. So when you're entering a product purchase, you want to go into that purchase knowing that people like you have had success with that product before. So being able to pattern match and find references and stories and anecdotes from people just like you is critically important. But that content has to be trustworthy, that it's credible, it's not fake, and then it's balanced in nature. No one wants to just hear the positives. They want to hear the negative too. And enterprise software is not perfect. Even consumer devices like an Apple isn't, an iPhone, which is brilliant. It's not a perfect device. People want to understand the nuances of and the limitations of a product to be able to go into a relationship with their eyes wide open. Nobody wants to be surprised post-purchase that the product doesn't work exactly like they thought it was going to work. And so that transparency was a universal need. The other thing I saw in buyers a lot is helping them tell the difference between products. Many marketing organizations end up using very similar messages. And for a buyer, it's really hard to discern the differences between two different products. And that's where peer opinions can make a real difference, where if they're high quality reviews that actually enumerate differences, points of differentiation, then it makes it easier for the buyer to tell the difference between products and to pick the one that's right for their use case and also go in with their eyes wide open. So I saw those as common needs across businesses. And, to take a small business, like if I'm buying accounting software for my business and I'm a small business, it's still a consequential decision for me. It may be a low dollar purchase, but it's an enormous hassle if I make the wrong decision and have to swap. Whereas at a large enterprise, a high value purchase may have the same level of consideration because it's, again, a material consideration to them and a material dollar spend. So again, I see more commonalities than differences. Another thing that I see as a commonality is that buyers want to have more control over the purchasing process. Nobody wants to be sold to. And I would say that's even more so today with younger buyers who've grown up with social media and Google as their friend, where they can just find information transparently and they have that expectation. And so as a brand, we're trying to help buyers do as much of their diligence as possible independently. And I think as vendors, we need to think about how to help buyers self-serve and not always think that the right way to deliver them information is by having a salesperson speak to them, but rather help them along their journey through information, resources, and different mechanisms.
Awesome. In your research, you talk about increasing demographics of millennials and Gen Z among B2B buyers and how it affects the purchasing behavior. In our case, 80% of our employees belong to this category, including key decision makers, and it could be relatable to almost every SaaS companies out there, isn't it? How do you think this changed the way companies made buying decisions? Is there any way to optimize traditional sales and marketing techniques so that it still work with this demographics?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our research, about 60% of enterprise purchasing is now conducted by millennials, where they're primary decision makers or actively involved in a decision-making committee. So to not think about this would be a huge mistake, right? As a marketer or as a selling organization, it's the largest single constituency. Traditional mechanisms don't work as well. Analyst reports, for example, are much more widely used by the older generation. It's not to say that the younger generation doesn't look at them, but they would rather hear from their peers than they would rather hear from an analyst. They would rather hear from their peers than they'd hear from a brand directly. So specifically to reviews, 45% of buyers now use reviews in their journey. That's proportionally larger with younger people, but reviews are now used twice as much as internal vendor-produced case studies, and more than that for analysts as well. So realizing that the channels have changed is really important. The other thing we see with younger buyers is that they're less likely to rely on past experience with products and more likely to just Google something and reach out to their peers. And then the third thing is just the idea of being able to trial a product or test it. That's incredibly important. People want to have a tangible experience with a product. A demo is pretty good. Demos are really, really important. But what's even better is if someone can experience the products themselves in some way. So those are universal needs, but they certainly skew with more so that way with the younger generations. And also, again, this idea of being able to take control of the journey and only engage with sales when they want to. I also think there's a desire for more pricing transparency as well.
All right. Here at Hexnode, we try to make sure that every customer is able to experience a demo or get to try out the product before going forward the purchase. Our partner usually take this step a little bit further by offering on-site demos addressing the customer's unique challenges and specific use cases. How do you think they can fine-tune this process to suit the growing millennial demographic?
I think at a certain stage in the buyer's journey, someone does want to see something very tuned to them and tailored to them and customized to them, like you're doing. I think at an earlier stage in the buyer's journey, people want a high-level impression. So the idea of maybe higher order recorded demos that people can watch, maybe even having users of your products demo in a recorded way, I think is a really compelling idea, because sometimes what people want to know is not an in-depth, evaluation of whether your product's right for them, but is it possibly right for them, such that they should continue to spend more time with you and learn more. So I think you have to adapt to where the buyer is in their journey and realize that there may not be a one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to something like demos. There's a time and a place for an in-depth custom demo, and there's a time and a place for a higher level conceptual demo or a higher level demo from a customer who just explains how they're using the product.
With the current situation, everything we dealt in person shifted online. The whole buying process changed overnight. Do you think this is here to stay, or?
Yes, I think absolutely. I think the pandemic has just accelerated the natural trends that were already occurring. We were already seeing a shift towards digital that was being driven by technology, also the software industry itself. Again, I think the companies that have a product-led growth aspect to them have been thriving for good reason. And I think, again, the desire for buyers to bring consumer-like experiences into the enterprise, whether that's the quest for transparency that we're trying to fulfill, or the quest for consumer-like usability that many companies in the enterprise software world are trying to fulfill as well. So I think these trends are permanent, and the pandemic has purely accelerated them.
Were you able to witness any unexpected growth in any specific industry? Because especially with the growing security concerns when work completely went remote, did business invest on security solutions to protect their data? And on that note, do you think the growing regulations around the privacy and data protection influence the buyer behavior, or is the data security low in their list of priorities?
Yes, both when COVID happened, we obviously started tracking and reporting on kind of not just traffic trends by industry category, but we also started to do market surveys of our buyer constituency. We have about 1 million people who use our site every month, and that actually grew 140% last year. So it's a really healthy sized audience, and we were able to do kind of market pulse surveys in terms of where they're going to spend or planning to spend. So we obviously saw certain category surging, video conferencing obviously being an obvious one, also things like learning management surged, but security was another area with the number of people working remote, accessing their internal production systems or work systems led to a need for enhanced security. Also, interestingly, we saw security surge as a criteria for any software purchase. That maybe it was things like the well-publicized Zoom security flaw, and then more recently, breaches at certain companies. Security is more on the minds of technology buyers than ever before, and it's become a more important consideration. So that's something that actually showed up in our most recent research. Each year, we do a survey of about 1,000 business technology buyers we call the B2B disconnect. And for the first time this year, we actually lasered in on security and saw it becoming a bigger concern for buyers.
Thank you, Vinay. It was a wonderful experience talking to you. I hope all our partners enjoyed this session as much as I did. A lot more insightful sessions are yet to come, so stay tuned.